Now on a more serious story. This is a true story. It was 2 weeks before Christmas, and Bill was in his favorite place in the tavern, Healy's Tavern, and he was doing his favorite thing. He was drinking. And Bill should have been working. He had had a contract with the New York World to write a story every week for the Sunday magazine. 3,000 words, 4,000 words. Back in those days in New York City, the papers were so big and so full that you could write long stories, longer than we could write now. And Bill owed him a story, and the deadline was coming up that night. And the editor was saying, I'm going to fire Bill. He's never on time. I know where he is. He's in the tavern drinking. I don't even know if he's going to do this story, but I'm going to fire him, but I want this one he owes me a Christmas story. Now Bill's stories were very popular. He only wrote one story a week, but he had written this for a couple of years. He had written almost over 100 stories. And people wondered if they were true or not, because they seemed like they were the people of New York. Someone said there were only 400 people worth knowing in New York City, the rich people. And Bill had said, no, there's 4 million stories here. There's 4 million stories in this city, and I'm going to tell a lot of them. And in the story, the editor's really upset because Bill has not turned in his work. And he sends the copy boy down to the bar, to the tavern, Healy's Tavern, and the boy comes in there, and Bill is still partying, drinking, spending all of his money. And the boy says, you got to turn in that story. I can't leave until you finish your story. Now, either he wrote it there in the bar, which the bar claims he did, or he went across the street because he lived across the street, and he wrote it there. But in 2 hours, he turned in this story. It became the greatest story that he wrote out of all the 400 stories that he did write. And in his story, it's about a young couple in New York City, like so many young couples. And the husband worked, but the wife stayed home. The husband, Jim, went to work every day. He was only in his 20s. And she stayed home, and she tried to save up money, and she'd only saved up $1.87. That's all she had. But it was 1905. You could buy a lot with $1.87. And she did a lot of window shopping and thought of things she could buy. It was Christmas Eve, and she thought, boy, it would be great if I could buy him a platinum chain for that watch that his father left. Because it was his prized possession. His father's watch that he took out and looked at, pocket watch. And she didn't know what she could do. She only had $1.87. And he went off to work, and she wandered around, and she looked through the windows, and she saw where there was a wig shop. And they would pay her $20 to cut her hair, and she had never cut her hair the whole time they'd been married. Even before that, her hair went all the way down below her knees when she let it down, and she kept it up in a bun. And she finally decides to sell that hair for $20 and buy that platinum chain for Jim's watch. When Jim comes home, and you know the story, in fact, my grandkids know this story. It's amazing. It's over 100 years ago this story was written. He has sold his watch, or hawked it, to buy her combs for her hair. So he bought her combs that she couldn't use. She bought him a watch chain. And the irony, it's used actually in schools to teach irony. And Bill, his name was William Sidney Porter, and wrote under the name of O. Henry. And he had a great life. He had started out, he was a pharmacist at age 19. He went out west and was a sheep herder. He was a musician. He had a band. He published a newspaper, published a magazine. He worked in a bank. He got in trouble. Money went missing. He claimed he never admitted that he took it. He didn't embezzle it, but he was convicted of embezzling and spent time in prison. And then he started writing short stories. The rest is, you know the story. He wrote under the name of O. Henry. And to this day, it's been over 100 years. In a small grave in Asheville, North Carolina, where he's buried, around Christmas time, people leave $1.87 on his tombstone to this very day. And the reason is, the story is, of course, an example of irony, but the title is The Gift of the Magi. And he adds 2 or 3 paragraphs to the end of this story because everybody remembers the irony of a man giving up his, losing his watch, getting a watch chain, a woman getting combs for hair she doesn't have. They remember the irony of the story. But the end of that story, he compares their gifts to the gifts that the wise men gave to the baby Jesus. And that were they useful gifts? Were they wise gifts? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Could the baby use those? Were they only symbolic gifts? That maybe he was a king and he was rightfully worthy of these gifts. But the greater gift was when you give up something you love for someone you love. And that is the magic of that story. And to this day, this next few weeks, there'll be $1.87 left on his tombstone in Asheville, North Carolina. Thanks.